Our main concern is that if too few of the children in the Middle East, the 400,000 Syrian children in Lebanon, are given virtually no access to schooling, if 100,000 or 200,000 of them don't receive any education, in 10 years' time they'll be easy prey for new forms of extremism.
More than 400,000 children are among the Syrian refugees currently living in Lebanon. In the capital Beirut, men gather at traffic intersections in the hope of being hired as casual labor. By the end of 2015, more than 1.1 million refugees from neighboring Syria had been registered in Lebanon. We are on our way to the Jesuit Refugee Service headquarters in downtown Beirut.
Gehen wir noch mal hin. Das müsste hier sein. Ja.
This is where German priest Father Stefan has his office. The Jesuit runs 6 schools in Lebanon, offering places to 2,500 refugee children according to need, from preschool through secondary school. Most of the schools are located just a few kilometers from the Syrian-Lebanese border.
This fertile area here is the Bekaa Valley. One of our schools is located in a side valley. There's a chain of hills here, foothills of the mountains that form the border. Our school is located just 3 kilometers from the Syrian border. On the other side lies Zabadani, where there was fierce fighting in recent months. This road from Beirut leads to Shtaura, Berelius, and Anjar, and then on to the Syrian capital, Damascus.
The Jesuit Refugee Service, or JRS, is an international Catholic charity. It provides schooling in the Bekaa Valley because that's where the need is greatest. In some areas of Lebanon, there are more refugees than locals. Many of them are living in shacks. The refugees here rent plots of land from the farmers and build camps on them. In the Bekaa Valley, there's one tented camp after another.
This one's not so big, but it's a typical camp. Some of them display signs of the NGOs that are helping them. There's another camp on the other side of the road. This is where our students live. They can walk to the school, which is not far from here.
Some families have been living here since the civil war started in 2011. Each new upsurge of violence produces another wave of refugees. The main victims of war and displacement are the children. Many are traumatized. Daily life is hard, and when there's fighting in the hills, you can hear it in the camps.
Zabadani is located on the other side of this hilly area overlooking the road to Damascus. The situation has been critical, and we were seriously considering closing the school. We observed the security situation closely, but all of our information indicated that the fighting would not spread across the border because of the mountain barrier. If this region were flat, the conflict might have spread, but the mountains protected us. The fighting raged for 2 to 3 weeks, and then it died down. But we're keeping an eye on developments. Fortunately, we get updates every day and we're well informed, but it's distressing to know that people are dying on the other side of the border.
Conditions in these camps are harsh. There's a shortage of blankets, mattresses, and even heating oil. By providing schooling for the children, the Jesuits are making life here a little more bearable. But the general situation in Lebanon is catastrophic. Half of the refugee children are receiving no education at all. The Jesuits' center in the middle of the camp caters to 500 children. There are far too few state-run schools. The Lebanese government is unable to cope.
The government keeps telling us if there are 100 children somewhere without a school, we'll do something about it. Right. We'll take them at their word. Things will improve if the government program gets funding in the next couple of years. Actually, I'm optimistic. Still, it's more difficult in the Bekaa Valley. There are far more refugees in relation to the local population, and there are fewer schools here than in other areas. Even if they were open for 2 shifts a day, it wouldn't be enough. More schools need to be built.
Working together with local partners, the Catholic Refugee Service is building another education center in the Bekaa Valley. A new floor is being added. A substantial network of local staff and partners supports the Jesuits' work.
We are Christians, you are Muslim, we bring money, you bring donation. It's perfect. It's a good partnership. I like that a lot. So there is no problem with that.
Together, they are enabling children to continue their education. The civil war has interrupted the schooling of many Syrian children for several years.
Ali, from where? Syria. من سوريا يعني سوريا يا زنبرهان from زبداني بسوريا مش هيك من الزبداني انت
The JRS International headquarters is here in Rome, a short distance from the Vatican. German Jesuit Peter Balleis was the organization's director for 8 years. His main focus was providing education for refugees.
When the children return to school, a semblance of normality returns to their lives. Education is more than just knowledge. It provides hope. It opens up perspectives. We all know you can lose everything, but you never lose what's in your head. We believe that education is the key to a long-term solution. If they return to their country, they do so with new knowledge, with education. If they're resettled, they at least have a language because we've taught them English or given them a certificate, which will help them get established there.
The NGO has a staff of more than 1,400. These include hundreds of volunteers, many of them non-Christians. The JRS is active in more than 50 countries, but increasingly its work is becoming the target of violent extremist groups that reject Western education.
It has become more difficult because certain ideological extremist groups, including religious extremists, no longer respect humanitarian work. So, like the refugees, we are subject to greater risks. It's something we have to accept and deal with.
In February 2014, Franz van der Lugt made this public appeal from the besieged town of Homs, which was in the grip of famine and suffering. The Dutch Jesuit couldn't accept the situation any longer. When he tried to mediate between the warring parties, the priest himself became a target of their aggression. Shortly after this video was recorded, Father van Lugt was murdered. In June 2014, a member of JRS was kidnapped in Afghanistan. He was only released 8 months later. Father Stefan Hengst is familiar with all these risks.
We're careful about where we go in Lebanon. For a while, warnings were issued not to get too close to the border because Islamic State is eager to kidnap people. They always need new hostages to execute. There's a genuine danger that Islamic State might try to kidnap people in Lebanon.
The Jesuits have another education center in the Burj Hammoud district of Beirut, where many Christians live. They have named it after Frans van der Lugt, their confrère who was murdered in Homs. JRS provides schooling in the form of 6-month courses. The aim is to prepare Syrian children to attend state-run schools here in Lebanon. A government-sponsored program has made this possible. In the afternoon, these boys and girls can do their homework in the Frans van der Lugt Center with support from the teachers.
Usually they have no one at home that can help them, and also they don't have the space at home. They don't have a desk, a table, a chair to sit and do their homework, the daily homework. So we open our classes for them, and some of them they do it themselves, some of them they need help.
All 400,000 of the Syrian refugee children in Lebanon require schooling. But the government program only provides places for half of them. The situation is critical.
Referring to these additional 200,000 children who are receiving no schooling, the government is trying to put pressure on the donor nations to provide more funds, because Lebanon cannot cope with the situation alone. Nevertheless, it's frustrating for us that there are currently children who can't go to school, who don't have a place. But we have to be careful not to come into conflict with the government.
As an NGO dependent on donations, JRS can't fund all the schools needed. However, Andrea Zard is determined to help the refugees as much as she can. The 29-year-old Lebanese coordinates the NGO's activities in Beirut. She tells us that there isn't just a lack of schools. The Syrian refugees are often made to feel unwelcome in Lebanon.
We received flyers saying Syrians have 24 hours to leave the area. Otherwise, consequences will be taken. I mean, it was just a group of boys in the region that threw out these papers, but we had to take that as a security risk and shut down all of the center to make sure that everybody's safe. We asked the families to stay at their houses and not move around a lot. So we always have to take our security measures.
Sometimes the children just need time to play, time and space. There are no public parks in Beirut. The NGO has to pay an entrance fee for the refugee children to use the grounds. Andrea Zard organizes various activities for the school children depending on their ages.
For the older children, we try to do it educational, so they go to a cave, to a museum, that kind of thing. But for the younger ones, we think it's a good way for them to get out of the house, out of the center, and a way for them to forget a bit of all the misery that they've gone through, from the trauma of the crisis to the situations they're living in here.
Most of the children come from poor families. The difficult economic situation hits the little ones hardest. They're also plagued by memories of war and of being forced to leave their homes. They have nightmares. At the education center, there's a psychologist who helps them deal with their trauma. Fatima al-Khatib sometimes asks the children to draw their families. That helps her identify the problems they have. Each member of the family is traumatized, and the children are often subjected to domestic violence. The children sometimes have bruises on their bodies, inflicted by their parents. The youngest are victimized and experience additional humiliations on top of their traumatic memories of war.
The family, and especially this girl's aggressive father, thought she was too little to understand and that she'd eventually forget everything. The parents' misguided conduct created enormous problems for the girl. She feels alienated from her family and doesn't believe they love her.
Confronted by problems like these, JRS doesn't confine its activities to education. Social workers visit the families. Many are helped simply by being listened to. The social workers hear dreadful things. This apartment in Beirut is home to a family of 8 from Latakia. The social workers discover that the father is unable to find work. The apartment costs the equivalent of about 415 euros a month. The kitchen is flooded and the roof leaks. 8 people share just 5 mattresses.
Is your house in Syria still standing, or has it been destroyed?
I have no idea. I haven't heard anything for 4.5 years.
He didn't know anything about his house.
You can't enter or leave the area where we lived. It's being heavily bombed right now. I have no idea what's happening there.
Only one of his 6 children is attending school. The social workers supervise the homework. In another apartment, the JRS workers meet a Kurdish mother. Her family is scattered across various countries. She and her husband are waiting to return to Syria. One of their sons lost his legs in the war. They fled from Islamic State because they are Kurds and were afraid of being decapitated. The last refugees on the social workers' round this morning are a family waiting for papers to travel to Canada. Many refugees want to leave Lebanon, where the cost of living is high and the prospects gloomy.
Was jumping from here. Okay. الحمد لله على السلامة. المهم ما صار له شيء. الحمد لله. أهم حاجة صحته.
The Refugee Service has set up a market for the impoverished families. Each registered family gets 25 points per person. That entitles them to select food and toiletries once each month. A bag of rice, for instance, costs 3 points. This service is a great help to the refugees. The teachers often see that the children are hungry.
For 20 or 30 days, they be enough for the 5 person for 25 or 30 days. I think it will be enough. The sugar, the rice, tomatoes, oil, and shampoo.
JRS tries to alleviate the psychological and social hardships of the refugees, but the main focus is education. Father Peter Balais explains the link between poor education and conflict.
The U.S., Germany, and Australia are all blue. That signifies prosperity. We work in the red countries, including the Sahel zone, the Central African region, parts of the Middle East, and Afghanistan, where there are conflicts. You can almost reduce it to a simple formula. Poor education means more conflict.
And we talked about all these things. He would like me to write him kind of a memo of both the need for David's successor in South Africa. Yeah. Right.
After 8 years of heading JRS, Father Balais has recently handed over the reins to an American, Father Thomas Smolich. Last year, they celebrated the NGO's 35th anniversary together. The new director is committed to following the same course as his predecessor.
Absolutely. So our own mission in the future, I think what you've started, what I'm going to try and carry on is this idea of education is the key to making a difference. That's what we can do. Others can do other things. We can do education.
Education is important for the children so they don't fall into the clutches of extremists. They need an alternative. With education, they can make their own way in life.
Bye.
The psychologist, Fatima Al-Khatib, knows from many conversations how easy it is for children to fall prey to extremist ideas. She gives an example from her therapeutic work.
This tank was drawn by an 11-year-old boy. When I asked him what it meant for him, he said, "When I'm big, I want to join the army and kill everybody."
Her therapeutic work is important, but it's difficult. The young psychologist is confronted with great need and suffering.
I have a letter from a schoolboy who says, "I'm very sad because Syria has been destroyed. We lived there in safety. Now everything in Lebanon is expensive and we're not happy. We just want to go back to Syria. We ask God to protect Syria."
The Lebanese government has asked JRS to start a new preschool class. Registrations have begun. But what will happen to the children at the end of the course? Where will they go to school? Doesn't the government want a long-term solution?
I don't think that Lebanon wants these people to stay here, and many of the refugees sense that they are not really welcome. They sense that they can't stay, and that they're not meant to stay.
JRS has limited means. The Jesuits are only able to make a small contribution in Lebanon. So, generally speaking, what needs to be done for the children?
Access to schooling, equal treatment, no separate classes but mixed, Syrian with Lebanese children. But can the country achieve that? A quarter of Lebanon's population are refugees. Actually, the war has to come to an end. The people have to be able to go home if they want to. And somehow the world, Europe, America, Australia, has to take in more refugees. Lebanon can't be left alone with this situation.
4 million Syrians have been forced to flee their country. Lebanon has accepted more than 1 million refugees. They need more help, urgently. Somewhere beyond these mountains, refugees have not only lost their homes, they've lost hope.